chapter 3. In Colossians chapter 3, it says, "Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom and teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." So as you see through Colossians, Paul has given us a direction in how we should live our lives and how we should be as Christians. And the more I think about our Christian life and being a Christian and how we should be, how we should present ourselves to the world, how we should present ourselves to each other, most importantly, how we should present ourselves to God and how we should live our lives. And what keeps coming to my mind, because this is something that I try to work on, need to work on better. Each time during the day, I have to think about this, and this is how we speak to each other, how we talk to each other, because that's usually, it could be one of the first impressions someone gets of us, isn't it? Of what we say to them, of how we say it to them. That's just as important as what we say. And the conversation that we have, that can direct our day. It can direct our conversation towards someone. It can determine whether we're going to have a discussion with someone or an argument with someone. It can determine whether we're even going to be able to teach someone. How we speak is important. And if I've been criticized for something most of my life, probably my mouth is the main one. From my parents to my teachers to everyone else, you need to watch your mouth. And it's mostly because you talk too much. And I guess that's why I became a preacher, so at least I had an avenue to do it, and people can't say much to me while I am doing it, But I think it is important. So I want to talk about some things where, and mostly out of Proverbs, that Solomon says that this is how we are to be, and this is what we should be. And starting in Proverbs 17 and 28, it says, "Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace, but when he shuts his lips, he is considered perceptive." So first and foremost, maybe sometimes we just need to shut up. Plain and simple, speaking for myself, sometimes I just need to hush. Sometimes I just need to be quiet. Sometimes it's not... Sometimes I don't have to say something. See, sometimes we think we always have to say something. We always have to speak, when sometimes maybe all we need to do is hush. Maybe all we need to do is be quiet. Maybe all we need to do is listen. Sometimes people think, well, I don't need to listen to what somebody else says. Well, maybe we do. And then maybe we can know what we should say. And maybe we should know how we should say it. In Proverbs 21 and 23, says, "Whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from trouble." And I thought about this verse a lot. How much trouble would I have stayed out of if I just held my tongue? What about you, Mike? How much would you stay out of? A lot. Sometimes we would stay out of a lot of trouble if we just, I had someone say something to me one time. They said, "You just couldn't let it go, could you? You just couldn't let it go." And I can't. Sometimes I just can't. My mouth this week almost gave me a ticket while mowing a yard. You ever got a ticket mowing the yard? I almost got a ticket mowing the yard because of when the gentleman pulled up. He was pretty hot when he pulled up. I was hot from mowing. And he said I did something that I didn't do. And so I defended myself. I thought I was defending myself, but the more I talked, the worse it got. And I realized, okay, he's got the power. He's going to write the ticket. As John said, I'm going to get my pound of flesh. If he's going to write the ticket anyway, I'm going to say what I need to say. And finally I turned it around and talked myself out of it. It was about blowing grass on the road that I didn't do. But I realized after that, you could have just hushed. You could have just been quiet and just let him say his piece, because he was the one in authority, and let him go on about his business, and you could have just went on about your business. But no, I couldn't let it go. So that's where we were, in the middle of a parking lot having that discussion. But it ended well. It ended okay. But sometimes we just need to hush, don't we? Sometimes we, and you probably know me by now, a lot of my lessons that I get up has to do with what I'm dealing with, or what I see, or what I observe, that I figure if it can help me, it can help someone else.
Whenever Papa Randall, he says you have the right to remain silent, and you say you use you in a court of law, that's probably the best time to remain silent right there.
Yes. Just because you have the right doesn't mean you have the ability. Sometimes I don't think and I say that jokingly, but to my fault. If my first defense is defense. If somebody approaches me with something, I'm going to get defensive first until I talk through it and realize, okay, you're making this worse, But it's true with anyone. Sometimes it's just good to be quiet. We don't have to always say something. We don't always have to get the upper hand. We don't always have to be right. And sometimes we talk just to be right. Now, I'm not talking about we hold our peace if we're right with Scripture and things, but even there's a way in which we do that. I'm talking about in everyday conversation. We need to make sure we're trying to be as peaceable as we can, as the Bible says, and sometimes it means we just need to hush. We just need to be quiet. Ecclesiastes 5:2 says, "Do not be rash with your mouth, and let your heart utter anything hastily before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few." And in this context he's talking about how we approach worship and things in which we do in worship. And sometimes we can be rash with God. Sometimes we can speak to God, just start blurting things out sometimes. And sometimes we need to just think about that. We need to think about the words in which we say and how they affect us. In James chapter 1, beginning at verse 19, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." So speaking, if it causes more trouble and causes more wrath, are we producing the righteousness of God? No. Sometimes we just need to, I try to learn this at the funeral home. I get yelled at some at the funeral home. And I have to realize that sometimes people just need to say what they need to say because they don't know what else to say. They just need to get it off their chest. They're feeling something, don't know how to deal with what they're feeling, so they just have to take it out on somebody. And I've decided that's my job to let them do that. That's my job to just let them have at it, And that's hard to do. It's hard to not say anything. It's hard not to get offended by it. It's hard not to want to put your 2 cents in, but sometimes you just diffuse the situation by letting them do that. So I wanted to start out with that to begin with, is sometimes we just need to be quiet. And I think that can be hard to do. You agree with that? Can it be hard to do? Or does some people don't have that trouble? I do. But I think that can go a long way in letting Christ shine in us than it is to let Ronald shine. I don't need to let Ronald shine. I need to let Christ shine. As we go all the way through Colossians, tells us that it's about putting on Christ. It's about letting Him do these things. It's by His authority. And we need to make sure that that's what we're doing. Another thing that can happen with our speech is destructive speech. In Proverbs 13:3, it says, "He who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips shall have destruction." We learned this as a kid. You ever got a whipping for talking back? We can talk to our destructiveness. We can cause more trouble by saying something or saying the wrong way and cause our own destruction. But this can happen in a lot of different ways, and we need to make sure we understand that. In Proverbs 14 and verse 3, in the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise will preserve them. A lot of how we speak comes from pride. We can be very prideful because we want to be right. We want to show that we're the one in control. We're the one who has the answers. Nobody else has the answers, so we have to be the one to present that. Look in Luke chapter 18. We have an example of this, I think. It said also he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus within himself, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all I possess. And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Sometimes we get into this to where we think that it's all about me and I'm the righteous one. And Jesus said, look over here at this one. Look at the one how he prayed to God. He prayed to God, aren't you glad I'm on your team? I don't act like all these other people, and I sure don't act like this tax collector over here. And he probably did, and that's a good thing, that you don't act like that. But you think I need to tell God that? You think God doesn't know that? He didn't come to him of, I'm glad you came to save me, and I'm glad I'm living a life in service to you, and I hope I can continue to be obedient to you. He looked at him and said, aren't you glad I'm on your team? Boy, you picked the right one with me. And the tax collector said, I'm just glad you had mercy on me because I'm a sinner. Which one left justified? See, we can get into this situation as a Christian to where this is how we think we are. And it becomes about being right to my standards, not to God's standards. And sometimes it's just not, it's not the way that we should be. And we need to make sure that we're not speaking to our destruction. In Proverbs chapter 17, verse 1, better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. What's he saying here? It's better to eat quietly than just to have a little morsel, but you have some peace and quiet, rather than have a whole feast and got everybody fighting around you. So which would you rather enjoy? Which one is more pleasant? Which one is more easy? Does it matter that you're eating a lot over here, but there's a lot of problems? Or does it matter right here you're just getting a morsel, but you have some peace and you have some quiet? Sometimes we've got to look and realize that there's a place for everything, but it's not all the time about strife and about division and about fussing and about fighting. And sometimes that's how we perceive ourselves. Look in Titus chapter 3. It says, reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning, being self-condemned. Go on to the next one if you don't care, Blake. Now a certain Jew named, no, wait a minute, that's all I had. Okay, I thought I put more, sorry. What I meant to do is go up above that. And if you go up above that and you see his how he's talking about, those in authority and things. Yeah, this is how we should treat individuals that's out in the world. But this is how we should treat everybody. We've got to make sure that we are looking and saying, okay, I need to be tenderhearted. I need to be kind. I need to realize what God, first and foremost, what God has done for me, and bring that kind of attitude, that kind of language, that kind of motive to how I treat other people. And I think the problem is we forget what God's done for us. We forget the love that He shows. First and foremost is Him showing us love, that He sent His Son to begin with. That's why He sent His Son. He chose. It wasn't some warm, fuzzy feeling that God had. He made a choice. I want to save these people because I love them. And here's what I'm going to do that. And we forget that it's us representing God to the world, We have to show that same kind of love. And this has nothing to do with compromise. It has nothing to do with being weak around individuals. It has to do with being like God. You know, the best strength that Jesus, I believe, ever shown while he was here on earth was self-control. Look at all that he could have done, but didn't do it. Look at the ability that he had done. How far would you have gotten before you scorched the earth when somebody spit on you? I mean, I couldn't have brought fire down fast enough. I mean, think about that self-control. But why did he show that self-control? Why did he remain silent as he remained silent? Why did he do that? Anybody know? Was he weak?
No, it showed us his strength.
I think it showed his strength and his love. He said, here's how I show the will of God. Because didn't he tell God in his prayer, thy will be done? So he did God's will. God's will was for him to go. He didn't fight that. He didn't take it, I don't want to say he didn't take it personally. That just had to be hard to me. I mean, look, think about it. I got offended when a guy, someone in authority rolled down their windows and questioned how I mowed the yard. You think I'd get offended if he spit in my face? I mean, you look at how human nature is of what we want to do. When we should fight those carnal feelings. I think that's all a part of walking in the Spirit, not in the flesh. We think beyond those things. We think beyond what we want to do and how we think it should be done, and it can bring destructive things. But just to de-escalate the situation sometimes. Sometimes there's just a right way to do things. Think of it this way. Look in Acts chapter 18. Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born in Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the Scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and talked accurately the things of the Lord, though he knew only the baptism of John. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogues. When Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. Now notice what he did. Was Apollos speaking publicly? Did Aquila and Priscilla stand up beside him and start yelling at him? What did they do? They took him off to the side and talked to him. And did they do any good with him? Go read the rest of the book of Acts, or this chapter anyway, what he was able to do. Because they cared for him, they wasn't rash about it. They wouldn't, harmful. I would want to say, boy, look, you don't have it figured out. You're not teaching right. All you know is the baptism of John. Quit teaching these things. Except they did that, but they took him aside to do it. Now, he was speaking publicly, but they took him aside to do it. I can't take credit for that. My wife was actually talking about that this morning. We were talking about another situation. She said, now, how would Aquila and Priscilla, how did they handle this situation? I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I thought, I'm going to add that in my lesson. That makes sense, See, all these great ideas aren't always mine, so some of them come somewhere else. But I think about this. I think about situations I get into on an everyday basis. How do I handle situations? How would I want someone to handle that to me? How would I want someone to approach me? I think I'd want them to approach me to know that first and foremost, they care enough about me to approach me and how they do it. So, any questions, comments so far?
I think there's a mindset even there with Apollos that they explained to him the way of God more accurately. They didn't go, Apollos was not teaching the whole truth because he didn't know it, but they weren't saying, Apollos, you false teacher, Apollos, you dissenter, it says they explained the way of God to him more accurately. And I think that's what we need to remember with some people is their intentions may be good, they just need to be taught. It's not that they're totally off base, have no concept. Apollos had a concept, but I like that word more accurately. They didn't say, Apollos, we got to upturn the tea table, and you totally missed the mark, and you're a false teacher. They said, hey, there's something you don't know.
Yeah.
Let's teach it to you. And I think that mindset is what can set it apart from the very beginning. You with that kind of heart.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I think everybody in this room needed to be taught the scriptures more accurately at some point, because it's only what we know at the time. You know, there's things I can look back on lessons or on Bible classes or even in studies that I've done and think, okay, I've got a different perspective on that now because I understand things more accurately here, or someone has explained it more accurately to me. So I can go back and study it and look. That's profitable. That's how you encourage. That's how you rebuke. That's how you refute. All of that in the whole nutshell of it is how you, to me, give hearing to the gospel. And I think that's what Jesus always did. But it comes down to our speech, of how we talk to people every day in our lives, or how we talk to people in Bible studies, or how we talk to, the cashier at the supermarket. Whatever it is, it's how we present the gospel by our speech, because that's what people's going to hear from us, isn't it? They're going to see us in our everyday life. They're going to see us in what we do. So, is what we're doing and saying, does it match up with what we're trying to teach? And if it doesn't match up, then we've got to fill in that gap. We've got to make sure that that's what we're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of ways that we could use our language, both for good and bad. In Proverbs 15:1, it says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Okay, say I'm having a discussion. Say me and Mike is having a discussion, and it's over on how we think we should do something in everyday life. I don't know, how we think we should mow the yard. He thinks you should, he does it the wrong way, where you mow in circles. I do it the right way, where you do it in lines. And we're talking about this. We're discussing this. And he says something I think's wrong. That's not my opinion, because my opinion is better than his opinion, because it's my opinion, right? That's how we think sometimes. So how do I respond to something? If he says something I don't agree with on mowing the yard, how do I respond with that? Do I respond with a soft answer, but still get my point across, or a harsh word? Which way would you rather receive it? Would you rather me tell you wrong softly, or tell you that you're wrong in a harsh word? Softly. It's the same. I mean, I make a joke out of this to prove a point, is our tone and how we say something can determine how the outcome of that conversation is going to go. I tell you, I've missed a lot of opportunities in my lifetime of being able to teach someone because I didn't approach them right. And I'm willing to admit that now. I wasn't willing to admit it then, but I'm willing to admit it now, that I come at it as, or in anything that I'm discussing at work. It's, somebody will say something and I'm like, well, that's fine. You can do it that way. If you want to do it wrong, go ahead and do it that way. Here's the way you should do it. That's always my approach. Why? Why is that my approach? Well, it's my way. I think, and sometimes we can be harsh with that. And it's just, we've got to realize, as corny as it sounds, we do have to ask ourselves, is this how Jesus would do it? That sounds just kind of cliche and things, but really, isn't that who we are? Isn't that what Colossians tells us? When we come up, don't we put on Christ in baptism? So it's not our life anymore. I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is our reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that perfect, acceptable will of God. Isn't that what Paul said in Romans 12? Isn't that what he said, that it's not our life anymore? We sacrificed our life. It has nothing to do with what I want, what my will is, what my feelings are. It had nothing to do with that anymore. It's all about thy will be done from that point on. So what is his will to be done? And I think that's what we have to think of when we're speaking, when we're in our actions, whatever it is that we're doing. In Proverbs 12 and verse 18, there is one who speaks like the piercing of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promotes health. Well, you can stab somebody or you can help somebody. We choose to do that by how we speak. I mean, think of words. How damaging are words? Are they pretty damaging? You ever had anybody say anything hurtful to you? You ever had anybody say anything angry to you? Can you remember what they said? You don't ever forget it. Ever. That's how damaging words are. That's how damaging things we say. We think something we do, somebody's bad. Think about what you say. That stays with them. No matter what happens from that point on, that never leaves you. Now, you can forgive them. You can do, all of these things there, but you can't make it leave your mind. So words are important. Words mean something. And speaking for myself, I don't think I give it the due that it is. I don't see how, I don't think of it as important as it is. And it's very important what you say. It's important what you say here. I used to tell the teenage boys when they were working up lessons, I said, you can make mistakes. You may not, you may, miss a word, or you may do this. And sometimes we worry about those things. But the number one thing you need to worry about is, are you saying what comes from the Scriptures? Because those words matter. These other things, it doesn't matter if you walk when you speak, or you put your hands in your pocket. I remember the first sermon Thomas Eves graded me on. He said, he had a lot of lists there, and I said, well, just give it to me straight. He said, I like what you said. He said, but you're very distracting. You had your hands in your pockets, you walked, you did this, you went back and forth, and I thought, so the next sermon I tried. I didn't put my hands in pocket. I grabbed the pulpit, and I couldn't hardly get any words out. I can't talk without moving something. I got to move something, so I thought, I don't want to be distracting, but I can't focus on that and focus on what I'm saying. I just have to move my hands, I guess. But sometimes we do, I think, focus on the wrong things. We need to focus on our words because they mean something. Not only can they upset someone, not only can they hurt someone's feelings or make them mad or whatever, they could cause them to lose their soul by what we say and how we say it. And we'll be held accountable for that, and we need to think about that. In Proverbs 15:2, the tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Now notice, the tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly. So what does that imply? If I could use knowledge rightly, what can I also do? Use it wrongly. Just because I'm right and I'm saying something that's right, I could use it in the wrong way. Or I could say it in the wrong way to where it's not, it's not being presented to where they get what the knowledge is. What we do, sometimes we just pour it out foolishly. I still may have the knowledge, but I'm pouring it out foolishly, and that knowledge doesn't do any good. I do that a lot. I'm thinking, why aren't they getting that? I'm right on that. Well, it's how I said it. It's how I presented it. It's how I'm pouring it out. I did that foolishly, so they're not hearing that it's right. Just like if somebody does that to me, I'm not hearing that it's right. I'm just seeing how they're pouring it out to me, and I don't like that. So I'm not hearing. It doesn't matter to me if it's right or not. I'm not hearing it. You don't think the same is true for somebody else? Well, of course it is. And we've got to think about that. In Proverbs 15:7, the lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the fool does not do so. So how do we disperse knowledge? Well, first, we've got to have the knowledge to disperse. And then two, I've got to make sure I'm dispersing it right. I've got to make sure that I'm doing it right. And as it says here, the fool doesn't do that. I think I skipped this one because I didn't know if I'd get that far. But look in Proverbs 13:1. I may not have put that on there, Blake. I think I skipped this because I didn't think I'd actually get this far. Either people aren't talking today or I'm not giving people a chance to, because I'm talking too much, I guess. But Proverbs 13:1, a wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. Now, when it comes to our speech, sometimes we've got to be able to take speech too, and take it the way that it's intended. And sometimes we don't want to do that if it's correction. Do you like to be corrected? Does anybody like to be corrected? I don't like to be corrected. But do we need to be corrected? Well, yeah, we need to be corrected. Again, it's how somebody corrects us, but notice what it says here. But a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. So if my attitude is not what it should be, I'm not going to listen to someone rebuke me. I've rebuked individuals who didn't want to hear it. I've been rebuked and I didn't want to hear it. So where does the problem lie? Well, it could rely in a couple places. How the rebuke is being handled or how the rebuke is being received. And I think it has to be looked at from both sides. But again, the goal here, as we started in Colossians, is we're Christians. We do everything by His authority. Everything that we do, word and deed, is by His authority, the way that He says it should be done. And that's how we present ourselves to the world. I'm just saying from a speech point of view, how are we doing on that? If we were to get graded, what would our grade be? You know, would it be an A? I don't think I can grade this like I wanted my grades were in school. Hey, if you'll just pass me, that's all I want. You know, you just, whatever it takes to get that passing grade. And when I was in school, I don't know how they grade now, it was a 70. You know, as long as I got that 70, as long as I seen that 70 on there, I didn't care. I didn't put forth any effort to get to the A's. Now, I got some A's. It was through luck and talking a lot of times. I could talk myself into an A sometimes, but I could also talk myself into an F a lot of times, you know. But we can't go through life, our Christian life, saying, well, it doesn't matter. You know, I've heard people say, well, as long as I make it to heaven by the skin of my teeth, that's all that matters. Well, yeah, we all want to make it, but how are we going to make it? Doing the very best we can here. You know, giving 100% to God, not giving just 50%, just trying to, you know, hop my way to heaven, you know, or drag my feet to heaven. That's not how we do it. We give the very best in everything that we do, and speech is part of that. And sometimes we look at it, as Jane says, we don't realize that it's just a small member, but it turns the wheel to everything. It's what guides us. And we've got to make sure that we are thinking about it. In Proverbs 13 and verse 8, sorry, Blake, I'm getting these on the fly. It says, the ransom of a man's life is his riches, but the poor does not hear rebuke. Again, it's about if I'm not living as I should, rebuke is not going to be part of what I want to do. But look at verse 10 of Proverbs 13. It says, by pride comes nothing but strife, but with the well-advised is wisdom. What about taking advice? Anybody ever took you aside to give you some good advice? How did that make you feel? Did you like that they gave you advice? Were you offended that they gave you advice? Did you listen to that advice? I used to tell somebody, you know, don't work too hard, and they'd always tell me, that's good advice, but I don't need it. You know, because they weren't going to work hard anyway, you know. But do we take good advice? But I want us to think about this one final verse as we discuss a few more things. Look at Matthew 12. A good man out of the good treasures of his heart brings forth good things. An evil man out of the evil treasures bring forth evil things. But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified. By your words you will be condemned. I don't know about you, that verse scares me. That verse is troubling. Every idle word that we speak will be judged by. Think about that. We'll either be justified or condemned by what we say. If we had to stand before God right now, how would we stand? Based on what I've said this whole past week. Where would we stand? Or based on how I've said what I've said this past week, where would I stand? That's pretty sobering thought. You know, I've actually thought, there I am sitting on a trailer on a lawnmower, And I could have lost my soul over a few blades of grass on the road in my attitude. That I didn't put on the road, by the way. But because I realized I didn't, I had to get that in, didn't I? See, you can't hush. You just can't. But I got to thinking how I handled that. How did it reflect on me? How did it reflect on the church? And one, how does it reflect on my soul based on I was right and I wanted to prove it. And that's all it was about. I was right. I didn't do it. And I wasn't going to hush till they agreed with it. I finally did because, they had the upper hand. But think about, is it really worth it? Are things like that, everyday situations, are they worth their soul? Say I won that argument, but left the impression of, that was the most hateful man I ever heard in my life and all that. Did I really win? No. How we speak matters. How people perceive us as we speak matters. And I think that we need to give that some consideration. Any final thoughts?
I think we want to be vindicated as quickly as possible. And maybe by second because whatever, we want that immediate, we think of immediate gratification, but I think that vindication is so hard. We don't want to leave any conversation with it, having given somebody else the final word, let them have the joy of knowing they were right or we were wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's like you talked about your Psalms class, that vindication has to come from God. It has to be from God in time. On that last day, if we are saved, if we go to heaven with God, that's our vindication. That's the vindication where everybody will know He's one of God's.
Mm-hmm.
He through the trials He's proved right. But if we are so hungry for that vindication now, like you said, we can give it all away. We can give it all away just for the praises of men.
I tell you, one of the greatest, most interesting, helpful things for me at studying the Psalms is how David approached God with his problems, his anger, and then that ties in with me with Paul talks about give place to your wrath. That's what David was doing. Sometimes, we're frustrated. Sometimes we're upset. Sometimes we want to be heard, but it's not profitable to do so. Give it to God. Give place to that wrath. Tell God what you're feeling. And what does that do? That helps you. God knows what you're going through. It doesn't escalate a situation with someone else. And it does what you wanted it to do in the first place. You just wanted to say it. Well, say it. But sometimes it's not the best thing to say it to the person. Tell God how you're feeling, what you want to say. And because God knows what you're feeling anyway. And I think that will help us. Any final thoughts? I appreciate you listening.